Average Joe had always loved a good barbecue. There was something about the smell of the grill and the taste of the food that made him feel alive. So when he received an invitation to a barbecue at his friend Corbin's house, he was excited to attend. Joe arrived at Corbin's house on a warm summer evening. The smell of grilled meat wafted through the air, making his mouth water. Corbin greeted him with a big smile and a cold beer. "Hey, Joe, glad you could make it," Corbin said as he handed Joe a beer. "We've got some delicious barbecue going on tonight." "I can smell it," Joe replied, taking a sip of his beer. "It smells amazing." As Joe walked around the backyard, he noticed something strange. There were dozens of chicken wings flying around, swooping and diving through the air. At first, he thought he was imagining things, but as he looked closer, he realized that the chicken wings were real. "What's with all the flying chicken wings?" Joe asked Corbin. Corbin laughed. "Oh, those are the chickens we're grilling tonight. We thought it would be fun to let them fly around before we cook them." Joe wasn't so sure it was a good idea to let live chickens fly around the backyard before killing them. But he didn't want to ruin the party, so he shrugged it off and grabbed a plate of food. As he sat down to eat, Joe couldn't help but feel like something was off. The chicken wings continued to fly around, screeching and squawking, and as he bit into a chicken leg, he could have sworn he heard it scream. Joe shook his head, trying to clear his mind. He was just being paranoid, he told himself, but as the night wore on, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Just as Joe was about to leave, one of the chicken wings landed on his plate. But this was no ordinary chicken wing. It had eyes and a beak and was staring right at him. "Hey there," the chicken wing said in a high-pitched voice. "My name is Flapper." Joe was so shocked that he couldn't even speak. He just stared at the chicken wing in disbelief. "I know this is weird," Flapper continued, "but we need your help. We're not just any chickens. We're a colony of chicken wings that have been cursed. We can fly and torment people, and it's been driving us crazy. We need someone to help us break the curse so that we can finally rest in peace." Joe didn't know what to make of this. Was he really talking to a chicken wing? But there was something in Flapper's eyes that made him believe that this was real. "Okay," Joe said slowly. "What can I do to help?" Flapper let out a squawk of joy. "You can cook us! The only way to break the curse is to grill us on a barbecue. It's the only way to stop us from flying around and causing chaos." Joe's stomach turned at the thought of grilling living creatures. But he didn't want to leave Flapper and the other chicken wings cursed forever. He agreed to help. As he walked out of Corbin's backyard with Flapper perched on his shoulder, Joe couldn't believe what had just happened. He had never imagined that he would be recruited by a colony of cursed chicken wings, but he knew that he had to do whatever it takes to break the curse and set them free. Joe spent the next few days trying to come up with a plan. He couldn't just grill the chicken wings in Corbin's backyard. He needed to find a secluded spot where he wouldn't be seen or heard. He searched the internet for abandoned barbecues and found an old one in the woods behind his house. It was rusted and overgrown with weeds, but it would do. Joe bought some charcoal and lighter fluid and headed to the woods. He set up the barbecue and waited for nightfall. As the sun set, Joe heard the flapping of wings. Flapper and the other chicken wings had arrived. "Are you ready?" Flapper asked. Joe nodded. "I'm ready. Let's do this." He lit the charcoal and waited for it to heat up. As he waited, he couldn't help but feel guilty. He was about to kill living creatures, and he wasn't sure he could go through with it. But then he thought about the torment the chicken wings had been through. They deserved to rest in peace, and he was the only one who could help them. Finally, the charcoal was ready. Joe placed the chicken wings on the grill and closed the lid. He heard their screams as they sizzled and popped, and he had to turn away. After a few minutes, he opened the lid and turned the chicken wings over. They were no longer flying or tormenting people, they were just pieces of meat cooking on the grill. Joe waited for them to cook all the way through. As he removed them from the grill, he noticed something strange. The chicken wings were no longer screaming or squawking. They were silent. He picked up one of the chicken wings and examined it closely. It was just a regular chicken wing with no eyes or beak or any sign of life. Flapper landed on Joe's shoulder. "Thank you," he said. You've broken the curse. We can finally rest in peace." Joe nodded, feeling a sense of relief. He had done the right thing even though it was difficult. As he walked back to his house, he couldn't help but wonder how many other cursed creatures were out there. He had stumbled upon a colony of cursed chicken wings, but what else was out there? And what could he do to help? He decided to do some research and see if there were any other cursed creatures that needed his help. He couldn't undo what had been done, but he could try to make things right. Joe's life was never the same after that night. He became known as the man who could break curses, and he spent his days helping cursed creatures find peace. He never forgot about Flapper and the chicken wings, and he knew that he had made a difference in their lives. As for Corbin's barbecue, Joe never attended another one. He couldn't bear the thought of eating chicken wings again, knowing what they had been through. But he did teach Corbin how to grill vegetables, and they had some pretty tasty vegetarian barbecues together. After breaking the curse of the chicken wings, Joe became obsessed with finding other cursed creatures. He spent his days scouring the internet, looking for any clues about other cursed beings. One day, he came across a forum discussing a cursed forest. According to the posts, anyone who entered the forest would never come back out. They were trapped inside, doomed to wander forever. Joe was intrigued. He had never heard of a cursed forest before. He decided to investigate. He packed some supplies and headed towards the forest. It was located in a remote area, surrounded by hills and valleys. The forest itself was dark and foreboding, with gnarled trees and tangled vines. Joe could feel an eerie energy emanating from the forest, but he pressed on. As he entered the forest, he could hear strange noises. It sounded like whispers and laughter, but he couldn't see anyone. The trees were so dense that he could barely see the sky above. Joe wandered for what felt like hours, trying to find his way out. But the deeper he went, the more lost he became. Suddenly, he heard a loud scream. It sounded like someone was in trouble. Joe followed the sound, pushing his way through the thick underbrush. He soon came upon a clearing. In the center of the clearing was a group of people, all dressed in white robes. They were chanting and dancing around a fire, and in the center of the fire was a large cauldron. Joe hid behind a tree, watching them in awe. He had stumbled upon a group of witches performing a ritual. As he watched, one of the witches noticed him. She pointed towards him and screamed. The others turned and saw Joe, and they started running towards him. Joe knew he had to get out of there. He turned and ran, dodging trees and branches as he went. The witches were close behind, their screams echoing through the forest. Suddenly, Joe felt a hand grab his ankle. He looked down and saw a witch trying to pull him down. He kicked her off and kept running, but he could feel more hands grabbing at him. Joe was desperate to escape. He could feel the curse of the forest taking hold of him. He couldn't let it win. He pushed himself harder, running faster than he ever had before. The witches were still chasing him, but he could see the edge of the forest up ahead. He burst through the trees and into the open air. The curse of the forest lifted, and he could feel the sun on his face. Joe collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. He had never been so scared in his life. As he lay there, he realized that he had to do something to stop the witches. They were cursed, just like the chicken wings, and they needed his help. He went back to his house and started researching ways to break the curse of the witches. He learned that they had been cursed by a powerful sorcerer, and that the only way to break the curse was to defeat the sorcerer. Joe knew he had to find the sorcerer and stop him. He packed his bags and headed back to the cursed forest. This time, he was prepared. He had a plan, and he was ready to fight. As he entered the forest, he could hear the whispers and laughter again, but this time he was not afraid. He was determined to break the curse and help those who had been trapped inside. He made his way to the clearing where he had seen the witches before. They were still there, chanting and dancing around the fire. The witches turned to face Joe, their eyes wide with surprise. They had not expected him to return. Joe stepped forward, holding up a small vial of liquid. "I have come to break the curse," he said, his voice steady and confident. The witches laughed. "You think you can defeat the sorcerer?" one of them sneered. "I don't have to defeat him," Joe replied. "I just have to break the curse." He threw the vial at the cauldron, and it shattered on impact. The liquid inside spilled out and began to sizzle and bubble. The witches screamed as the curse began to break. They fell to the ground, writhing in pain as the curse was lifted from their bodies. But just as Joe thought the curse had been broken, he heard a voice behind him. "Well done, my friend," the voice said. "You have broken the curse." Joe turned around and saw the sorcerer standing behind him. He was tall and thin, with long white hair and piercing blue eyes. "You are the one who cursed these people?" Joe asked, his voice full of anger. The sorcerer nodded. "I cursed them to punish them for their sins," he said. "But now, thanks to you, they are free." Joe stepped forward, ready to confront the sorcerer, but before he could say anything, the sorcerer raised his hand and muttered a few words. Suddenly, Joe felt a sharp pain in his chest. He looked down and saw a small knife protruding from his heart. You stabbed me," Joe gasped. The sorcerer smiled. "I had to do it," he said. "You were getting too close to the truth." Joe fell to the ground, his vision fading. He could hear the sorcerer laughing as he slipped into unconsciousness. When Joe woke up, he was in a hospital bed. His chest was bandaged, and he felt weak and groggy. A nurse came in and checked his vitals. "You're lucky to be alive," she said. "That knife missed your heart by millimeters." Joe tried to sit up, but the nurse pushed him back down. "You need to rest," she said. As he lay there, Joe thought about what had happened. He had gone to the cursed forest to break a curse, but he had ended up getting stabbed by the very person he was trying to stop. But then something occurred to him. The sorcerer had said that he had to do it to keep Joe from getting too close to the truth. What truth? Joe started to do some digging, looking through old newspapers and archives. He soon found what he was looking for. The sorcerer had not cursed the witches for their sins. He had cursed them because they had stumbled upon a secret that he had been trying to keep hidden. The sorcerer was a member of a secret society, and he had been using the cursed forest to hide their meetings. The witches had stumbled upon one of these meetings and had seen too much. Joe knew he had to do something. He couldn't let the sorcerer get away with what he had done. He contacted the police and told them everything he had discovered. They were skeptical at first, but Joe had proof. The police investigated and found evidence of the secret society. They arrested the sorcerer and several other members. Joe was hailed as a hero, and he received numerous accolades for his bravery. But he didn't feel like a hero. He had been stabbed, and he had almost died. He had stumbled upon the truth by accident. As he lay in bed, recovering from his injuries, Joe couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The events of the past few days had taken a toll on him, both physically and emotionally. But he also felt a sense of accomplishment. He had uncovered a dark secret and had brought those responsible to justice. He had helped the cursed witches and had broken their curse. As he looked out the window, he saw the sun beginning to set. He knew he had a long road to recovery ahead of him, but he was ready for it. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Joe turned to see who it was, and his heart skipped a beat when he saw the person standing there. It was Flapper, the head chicken wing that he had grilled and defeated. But instead of looking menacing, Flapper looked grateful. "Thank you, Joe," Flapper said in a high-pitched voice. "You saved us from a terrible fate. We were cursed by the sorcerer, just like the witches." Joe couldn't believe what he was hearing. "The chicken wings had been cursed too?" Flapper continued. "But now that you have defeated the sorcerer and broken the curse, we are free. We can live our lives as we please, without fear of being tormented or causing harm." Joe nodded, feeling a sense of relief. He had unknowingly helped not just the witches, but also the chicken wings. Flapper turned to leave, but then paused and looked back at Joe. "And who knows," she said, "maybe one day we'll have a barbecue together." Joe couldn't help but smile. It seemed like a strange offer, but somehow it felt right. As Flapper left the room, Joe felt a sense of peace wash over him. He had gone through a terrifying experience, but he had come out the other side stronger and more determined than ever. He knew that there would always be more mysteries to uncover and more challenges to face, but he was ready for them. And with the support of his friends and loved ones, he knew he could overcome anything.